guys, welcome back to my channel, and we're going to hop right into it. So I'm going to be using this Anastasia Dip Brow in Soft Brown. I think this is probably the most universal shade. This NYX Under Eye Concealer in the lightest shade. The NYX Proof It, it's a waterproof brow primer. A spoolie brush, and the E65 angled eyeliner brush. This one is my favorite, but whichever you have works perfectly. So for step one, we are just going to be spooling our brows. I'm just going to be brushing my brow hairs in the direction that I want them to go. Before I brush them, they just are kind of doing their own thing, so I tend to brush them up and out. Okay, so as a general rule, you want your brow hairs to be in that line, your arch to be there, and the outer corner to be there. So you don't really want to go too far past this corner because you don't want it to look like they're too far down. So for the very first part, I'm going to be putting this waterproof brow primer. And this is kind of thick. I'm not super impressed with the applicator that they put with this. I felt like it should have been like a spoolie type brush, but that's okay. So I just went through with my own and kind of brushed it through. It really makes your brow hairs stick. Like, this stuff is amazing. So I'm going to be using that pomade, and as you can see, I'm just going to be putting that on my brush. I do both sides because I want it to be as sharp and pointed on that brush as I possibly can. I always start at my arch because I find that the arch is the most difficult part for me to do. So I feel like if I start there, then I can work around it perfectly. So I just kind of start right where my arch, or at least where I want my arch to be, and I get a little bit lighter handed as I go out towards the tail. So as you can see, I'm just kind of pushing the product in right now. I'm not worrying too much about where it's at. I'm just pushing it into where the brows are. So then when I go in towards the inner corner, I want this bottom line to be as defined as possible, mostly just because I feel like when it's not very defined on me, it just makes my eyelid look very small. So I'm just going through and kind of brushing that through. You can see me bringing it in towards the inner corner very, very lightly. I don't want that to be very dark at all. So right now, my main point is to get the product where I want it to be, or at least in the general area that I want it to be. I'm not super worried about the, exactly how it looks. It doesn't have to be perfect right this minute. So I'm just going to take the spoolie brush and brush through that to kind of soften it, especially when you're using something like that NYX brow primer. This stuff is so intense, which is great. That's not something you would have to use every single day, but my brows tend to be like kind of unruly, so it's like kind of a savior for me. So I'm just going to be doing that exact same process on the other eye. I'm sorry, it got kind of blurry right here. There we go. That's so much better. So the exact same thing, and like I said, you want to be pretty light-handed with this brow primer if you do decide to use it, because it is kind of intense. But you could be like probably getting in the pool with this and it would stay. Like, this stuff is seriously amazing. Okay, so I'm doing the exact same thing on this side, and as you can see, I just kind of flick that end down because I don't want it to be super thick towards the tail. That's where I want the sharpest part to be. And I don't want that to be super dark either, so I keep that very light-handed. The biggest thing that you have to remember is that your brows are never going to be identical, no matter how hard you try. Unfortunately, our brows are more like sisters than twins, so they're never going to be perfectly identical. All you have to remember is to work with what you have, and be patient, take it slow, and this isn't something that comes to everybody. It took me forever before I got my brows to like a happy place. I mean years. Like, I did not have any idea how to do my brows forever. So it's a process. I'm going to be using this flat definer brush by Morphe, and I'm just going to be putting that concealer and sculpting out the brows. Like I said, this isn't a super natural like look for the brows, but this is what I like to do, especially if I'm not doing a ton of other makeup, because I feel like I want it to be, very structured, if I'm not going in with the serious contour or anything like that. So I'm just using the concealer to kind of clean up underneath of the brow and keep it very light and highlighted. You generally want to go in with a color of concealer that's the same color as your skin, just because you don't want it to be too drastically different. And now, as you can see, I'm just taking the big fluffy brush and I'm taking some of my translucent powder and just brushing that over so that it doesn't look shiny or anything like that. I'm keeping this very sharp and sculpted. This is just how I like to do my brows. You can do yours however you want. They don't have to be this thin, they don't have to be this sculpted. This is just what I like, and I've had a lot of people ask me about how I do them, so that's why we're doing them like this. Same process on the other side. I'm just taking a little bit of translucent powder and buffing out that concealer. So this is where it gets interesting. I take my beauty blender, and this is a cream foundation in light olive. It's by Graftopia, and you can get it on Amazon or any special effects store. And I'm just taking this and pressing it into the first half of my brows. Not intensely, like you can see, it's just kind of lightening that dark brown color because I want it to be very faded and ombre. So I'm just going to take that and then I brush that product through a little bit. I just took a tiny little bit because you don't want to white out the first half of your brows. So I'm just kind of massaging that into the brow hairs and brushing them to where I want them to be. This is the fun part. This is totally optional. This is the Becca highlighter in Champagne Pop by Jaclyn Hill, which is my current obsession. I bought 3 of these. These are my favorite things ever. So I'm just going to be taking this to highlight my brow bone, and the way that I do this is a little bit different. I tend to like my brows to be very highlighted, so I highlight just under the arch, and I also highlight just above the arch. So I just want it to be very highlighted through here. So I hope you enjoyed. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you again in the next video. Thank you.
Give it to me, I'm worth it. Baby, I'm worth it. Give it to me, I'm worth it.